Apparently, Man City have won a court case. Our main concern is how can Newcastle win qualification to the Champions League? Find out here on Toon Tactics TV, folks.
Oh, brilliant from Shea. And now Murphy could take on the shot. Fabian Shea
All right, all right, all right. How are you folks doing? How is your evening going? Now, I don't know what's been going on, but apparently, well, I do kind of. I've been watching the X things on X. You know, apparently, Man City have won some parts of the case of the in terms of the anti competitive situation. The Premier League have won others. Now, as you can probably hear from my voice, I'm not overly sure what is going on and how much is won. Let me have a quick dabble. But before I do, folks, I want to know how you're all doing this evening. Let me know where you're listening from. Let me know where you are coming from. Now, obviously, the main part of today's show, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be doing a little bit of a routine health check on Newcastle United Football Club, where we're at in terms of the team's performance and what we can do to improve. But before all of that, I want to have a quick dabble into exactly what's going on with this court case of Man City. Apparently, Man City have won something. I'm not going to I'm not going to go too deep into it because apparently they've won some parts of the anti-competitive case. I want to be able to read it properly. I want to be able to see it properly before I say anything else on it. But it's looking positive for Newcastle United, especially in terms of ourselves going forward in the recruitment situation. So, but let's talk about us. Let's talk about Newcastle. Let's talk about essentially what today's show is going to be about, which is we're finding out exactly where Newcastle are at in terms of our own performances, in terms of what we can do as a club to improve our performances and where it's heading to. Now, the focus of where I think it will be, and you guys would have heard in terms of what I've said earlier, is that when we're talking is the source of what Newcastle are, our identity and what we can be is our intensity. And when we talk about our intensity, we mean specifically around, and I'm going to be focusing on ground duels, winning duels in particular. So tackles won, the ball won on the ground, as well as in the air. And from what I will show you guys in this show, unfortunately, this is the part where in the first 7 games, Newcastle have been, barring maybe the last, maybe 2 or 3 games, but all can still be improved, that being the Wolves game, Man City and Everton. Generally, Newcastle have been suffering in that area. So I'm going to talk about why, in the first place, ground duels are so important, and I'm gonna use this video from our Brighton manager, who for those that have been watching, Brighton have came back from a 2-0 deficit to Tottenham, and they turned it after losing 2-0 in the first half. They turned it around in the second half, scored 3 goals and won 3-2. And in the interview, post-match interview that I'm about to show you folks, the interviewer asks, I'm so sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name, Brighton manager, what was the secret behind their turnaround? How did they go from 2-0 to 3-2? What was the secret behind what they did? And he focuses on individual duels. And we're going to talk about why it's so important. So let's play this video and take you through it. So why are duels ground duels, aerial duels. I'm going to be talking about them kind of interchangeably for you guys to know, but it all means the same thing, kind of one-on-one duels between opponents, why they're so important and why they're so important for Newcastle and the way they play. Now, we've got here Mr. Hersler, sorry, that's his name. Hersler is going to take us through it. He's going to explain to us how Brighton turned it around against Tottenham, and he focuses on this idea of the one-to-one duels.
Thing and the second important thing is like that you try to get more in personal duels, because if you win these personal duels, you gain self-confidence, and if you gain self-confidence,
so winning with these individual duels gives them the self-confidence to in the game.
then of course everything gets more easily on the pitch. You get like in a flow, and I think you have.
So you gain more confidence, things get easier on the pitch. And so there's a ripple effect on other aspects of the game. We're going to talk about how these aspects also affect Newcastle United in terms of attacking, especially in the final third, defending, being able to win the ball high up, take also territorial territorial dominance in various areas of the pitch as well. All of that, all these ripple effects come from these individual one-to-one duels, and this is where Mr. Herzler is referring to when he talks about Brighton's comeback.
Have to work hard for getting in this flow, and the players worked hard for this flow, and in the end they had this flow and they used it.
And it was a terrific atmosphere.
So to be able to get the flow, which is talking about, and again, the ripple effect of winning your one-to-one duels, the ripple effect of winning your ground duels, your aerial duels, your tackling, all these things that kind of all make up the thing around ground duels or winning duels. All of these aspects make up the reason how Brighton were able to get into the flow, and the ripple effect that it helped them in their attacking display, taking dominion, dominance in various the territorial dominance over the pitch over Tottenham, and how it enabled them to increase, for instance, their shots on target, shots on target, their crosses, their passes in the final third, and obviously it impacted the most important part of those metrics of the stats, which their goals. And so this is why when we're talking about why duels, ground duels, one-to-one duels, intensity is all part of intensity, and why it's so important to what Newcastle United do. And so so how does this have a ripple effect on these other things that we're about to talk about? And before we kind of talk about, we're gonna in the section before this one, we're going to talk about how it affects us in our defense, in our attack, and in our passing. But first of all, if I can get it onto my screen, which I can, I'm sure I can, take that off, put this on. I want to put my introduction page on. If I can put that on, share this, share screen. Here we go. I want to be able to kind of put my introduction on. Here we go. So before we kind of talk about, like we talk, the ripple effects on attacking, on passing, on defending, we are gonna talk about, obviously we've talked about the importance of ground duels and how it gets into the mode of these things. We're going to talk about what's in our control, i.e., kind of the things that affect ground duels. So when we're talking about what affects a team's doing well in their duels and winning duels, making as an overall team performance, not just individuals, but also as a team, what increases that output in ground duels and aerial duels and just winning duels in itself. And we'll talk about, and there's various aspects to that. There's age, there's fitness, there's fatigue, there's physicality, there's personal situations for individual players, but also like contracts. Eddie Howe alluded to the fact that how in his experience, for instance, when players are in their final year of their contracts, this does affect their performance on the pitch. And we highlighted the example of, for instance, Ryan Fraser, who didn't want to even step on the pitch for Bournemouth and Eddie Howe, because he was concerned that he would hurt himself and that, and, with no contract, if he's injured, then his career is over. And so, again, if players are thinking these things and they're on the pitch and they got and they need to get into the tackles, they need to be able to perform and to work hard, and these things in the back of their mind, all these things affect their performance on the pitch, affect the percentages of ground duels won, all of which then impact the team in itself. Now, some of these things are in our control, some of these things are out of our control, i.e. recruitment, being able to bring in players, being able to add competition to the team. So if a player, for instance, on the pitch and they know no matter how they play, they're still going to get picked for the next game, that's going to impact their performance. But if they know if they slip up today, they might not be able to play next week, then of course, that's going to also encourage them to be able to perform. So how are Newcastle, if we're talking about Newcastle, how were Newcastle performing before? How were Newcastle performing as a team perform? What made ground duels, what made not just ground duels, but the ground duels, aerial duels, duels in just in terms of winning the ball, taking that territorial dominance on the pitch, and we're talking about one-to-one duels, 1v1 with their opponents. This was a staple diet for Newcastle since Eddie Howe has took over the team. And we're going to skip over the first year in terms of when we managed to stay up in the league, but we see how important, how good we were in that 22-23 season when we finished fourth and we were joint top in terms of defense, our defense record, and conceding the same amount of goals as Man City, for instance, where we were like the third or fourth highest team in terms of goal scoring, where we were just absolutely exceptional in so many areas of the pitch, winning home and away. Our home record was exceptional as well. And a big part of that was our intensity, and part of that intensity is our duels, our 1v1 duels, how high up we pressed, how much we won the ball up the field. All of these things come down to how individual players win their individual battles with the individual players of the opposition team. And if you look at our record, I want to make sure you guys are able to see on my screen. Let me make it bigger for you folks. Can you guys see that? Let me see. All right, so you can see that. So for instance, in the first year, in that technically second year under Eddie Howe, duels this is as a team, 22-23 season, duels won per game 50.2%. In the next year, which is the year before, and this is interesting because we had so many injuries, 51%. So we actually stepped it up. Now, obviously, we know that the amount of injuries and everything else hindered us, and there's other factors. But it's interesting that went up. Currently, in the first 7 games of this season, our duels have gone down to 49.3%. Now, some might think that's not really high, but we're gonna go a bit granular on that, and we are gonna focus a little bit more. I'm going to focus a little bit more on our centre backs in particular, not to pick on them, but kind of it's a big part of our style of play, how our centre backs push up the field, how our centre backs are able to win the individual duels, and how it enables our midfield to push up, to connect with our forwards. Because if there is a gap between our centre backs and our forwards, the midfield are forced to push back, are forced to go back and disconnect with the forward line. And so that affects our attacking, that affects how much dominance we have in the middle of the park, which affects just how much the opposition is able to attack us. And you'll see some of the ripple effects of that in terms of stats that are got in terms of shots against us, shots on target against us. And I'm going to talk about those things. So we're not as high as we need to be in terms of our individual duels. The ground duels we won in the first year, 22-23, 48.9%. And at the moment, if we skipped, and last year was 50.8%. Currently, we're 49.6%. So only 0.3% off. Aerial duels won 56.7% in that year. It dropped down last year to 51%. And it's gone a little bit higher, but 53.6% in this year. So in some aspects, we're doing okay. We're just treading water. But in other aspects, we've essentially we're underperforming overall in terms of our duels one, which obviously includes aerial duels, ground duels, and like anything in between. So if we're looking at that now, as I said, I want to be able to focus in on a little bit on our centre backs and how they've been performing. Now, keeping in mind, I'm not. This is the first 7 games, and things can change. Things can be different as well. Like in terms of this is just like the first 7 games. There are different reasons why different players are performing. So it's not like I'm not kind of putting it in stone. Got a comment here before I go into the individual players themselves. Jordan Brentwell, evening to you, sir. I hope you're well. Philip, ability and fitness are 2 different things. Fitness doesn't win games. Ability does. Ability does. Newcastle results are based on players showing their ability and hard work. So ability and fitness are 2 different things. Fitness doesn't win games. Ability does. Fitness so does. Newcastle results are based on players showing their ability and hard work. I don't disagree with you. What I would say is that if we take it to the extreme, for instance, if players are unfit, it doesn't how much ability they have or how much hard. And I think even you mentioned ability and hard work. You can't really do hard work unless you have fitness, unless you're fit, unless you have physical fitness about you. That's going to have a direct impact. Your level of fitness is going to have a direct impact on your hard work and your ability to be able to demonstrate your ability to demonstrate your ability on a consistent level throughout the game, for instance. So I think there is a similarity between all those things, and so there's a link. I think all those things overlap, but I don't think you're wrong. I personally think that all those things overlap within themselves. And when I talk about fitness as well, just to add to that, is I'm also referring to physicality. I'm referring to fatigue. So, for instance, Bruno Gomes, who played up to like nearly 60 games last season because he was also doing international duties, cup competitions, and obviously what he's doing in the Premier League, up to 60 games. He's a fit guy. He's also got a lot of ability and he works hard. But we know that he's also was suffering from fatigue because of he's been involved in all those competitions, and this does impact his performance. Rodri, who unfortunately recently suffered from an ACL, he had been prior to that talking about how tired he was and how this was impacting him, and he was impacting his team as well. Now, it's not that he was unfit, for instance, but he was also suffering from fatigue, which is obviously part of his fitness as well. So I want to hone in. I hope that answers your questions, but do let me know, kind of come back to me on that one. So we talked about the importance of ground duels, the importance of duels in themselves. So winning your individual battles, how that has a ripple effect. And we're going to talk about how that has a ripple effect on passing, attacking, and we're going to talk about defending as well, and how Newcastle, especially since that 22-23 season when Newcastle finished 4th in the league, where our overall kind of ground duels were up, and how it's slightly down in this year as well in different areas, a little bit up in others, but there's a general decline currently. And we're keeping in mind there is the first 7 games, and maybe there's still a hangover from the previous season as well. And there's various aspects to that. I want to focus in this section on individual players and how this has impacted on some of our individual players. And so if we look at, for instance, I've looked at, especially on our centre backs, and I focused in on the centre backs because the overall structure, if we're looking to be proactive in our press. So, for instance, our turnover rate in the final third, for instance, this year, we're mid-table, which is unusual for Newcastle. And what it also suggests is that Newcastle, we haven't been able to really impose ourselves in games. And there's other stats I'm going to show you guys that also show how we've not been able to impose ourselves. I think part of that, and it's been a little bit different the last 2 games, has been down to the situation with our centre backs. And if we look at, for instance, obviously Sven Botman, in that 22-23 season. If we look at how many total duels won, he was at 67%. He was at 67% in terms of duels won. Just remember that this season, as a team, according to SofaScore, we're going to look at another stat on Optastat, which is a bit different. We're even lower on Optastat as a team, but on SofaScore, we're on 46. We're on 49%. Sven Botman on duels won was on 67%. That's how good we were. Fabian Schär in that same year, and obviously we can't do more on Sven Botman because he's been injured the last couple of seasons, but Fabian Schär, for instance, in that 22-23 era, his total duels won, total duels was at 65%. 65% was Fabian Schär. This year, we're skipping the last year, but this year, he's on total duels won at 45%. That's a 20%. That's a 20% decline. 20% decline. And if you look at his heat map from that 23% 23 era, he was really pushing. He was all the way up to the halfway line. It was burning hot. Now, if your centre back is all the way up to that halfway line, majority of games, that naturally pushes up your midfield, that naturally pushes up your attack. Hence why your turnovers, you're very much imposing and taking dominion over various areas of that pitch. Hence why our shots on the opposition goal were so high, and the shots that we conceded were so low because we spent so much time in the opposition half. The same story is for Dan Burn. Let me make sure you guys can see the screen as well. Let me make sure I get myself onto that screen. Is that Dan Burn? All right, brilliant. Yes, the same story is for Dan Burn. And again, I'm not trying to pick on these guys. All I'm trying to say, there's an indicator for all of these things. 22-23 season, Dan Burn, was on total duels won. He was on 56%. And remember, he was playing left back. Those times. 56% won. In the following season, when he was playing left centre back, on 23-24 season, Mr. Burn was on 58%. So even in the season when we were suffering massive injuries, he got to play finally left centre back. His win percentage, total duels won, his individual battles was at 58%. Now, interestingly, Mr. Burn is in this season, he's on 59%, and ground duels is on 50%. Now, there's different stats for different places. I'm going to be going on Optastat as well, but it's interesting how it appears that he's maintained his stats in this part of the season. But his partner, Fabian Schär, stats have gone really, really down. And that's all of these things impact a team's ability to be able to play up the field. And so we've talked about ground duels, the importance of ground duels. We've talked about how essentially, obviously, Brighton's manager Herzog, I'm going to mispronounce his name, was talking about how Brighton were able to turn their game around against Tottenham from 2-0 down to 3-2 because their players were able to up their levels in their 1v1s, in their individual duel battles with the opposition players, and this allowed a natural flow. This now allowed them to gain confidence, and this had a ripple effect on other aspects of the game. They were able to take dominion in various areas of the pitch, and they were able to get up the pitch, and it changed the most important metric, obviously, which was the goals themselves. And so if we look at the and I'm kind of laying the groundwork for where I'm about to go with this. And we're going to talk, now we're going to go to the Optastats as well. Slightly different stats on there compared to SofaScore, for instance. But before we do that, I want to lay the groundwork again and kind of drill that point home in terms of why individual total total duels won, aerial duels, ground duels, total duels, all of these things in general, in a simple term, your 1v1 battles of individual players. Why these are so important is this. So this is laying the groundwork. So this is from Optistat. And essentially what it's showing is in pink. So if you can see, if you can imagine, this is Newcastle going from left to right. So from left to right. And what it's showing you is in pink are the areas where opposition teams have territorial dominance over Newcastle United. In grey is where these areas are contested at the moment. So it's pretty much 50-50 at this stage. And in purple are the areas where Newcastle have the more dominance. And what is interesting about that is in the area, and this is where it plays into the individual battles. Remember, we spoke about how our centre backs, in particular, in my view, in particular, have not been winning their individual battles as at the same rate as they have been in the previous seasons. And we talked about how there's different reasons for that. Obviously, there's different reasons for that. It could be fitness, it could be hard work, it could be, again, it was mentioned, ability, just overall quality, in which we talk about recruitment. You know, Newcastle have been trying to get a particular profile of centre backs, in Mark Gahey and Tapsoba. All these things have an impact in terms of how a team is able to win in their individual battles and be able to take territorial dominance over the pitch. And you can see that has also affected the way we're able to push up as well. And again, we haven't mentioned, obviously, both Dan Burn and Ishara are 2 years older than that season in 22-23 when we finished fourth. And these guys were their total duels, which were at 65%, 68%, really taking dominion. And where they are now at 49% and 50% individually, I think it's just a little bit higher for Dan Burn. It's a 10 to 15 to 20% decline. So with that said, with that kind of decline, you can now see from left to right, teams are in the purple. Newcastle have a little bit of dominance, but it's mainly contested, and especially in the flanks areas, teams are having a lot of joy, and it's also having a ripple effect in terms of that midfield, which is a lot of the time being contested as well, and so that also impacts how they're able to attack, and you can see that. In the center of that, in the opposition half, in the center areas of the opposition half, teams have dominance over Newcastle, and this is a stat where I'll get to show you, has an impact on how Newcastle. When you look at Newcastle's passes in the final third, are very, very low. In fact, average or below average, and you can see why. They have no dominance in that area of the field, and I say, and in my view, it's because there's a ripple effect from how Newcastle's ground duels or aerial duels and total duels have declined. That they've not been winning their individual battles. This is up to the Man City and Everton game, but in large part, and a little bit of the Wolves, and mainly the Wolves game as well, but mainly Newcastle's aerial duels won have been very, very low, and this has had an impact on how Newcastle attacked. And you can see that we're kind of really much relying on the attacking on the wings and the flanks, where there's quality with Gordon, with Barnes and Jacob Murphy on the other side. But that's also made Newcastle very, very predictable to the opposition. So if your opposition team, you're thinking we just have, and you have seen this especially with teams that are of either mid-table or below. They've been the way they've been trying to stop Newcastle is either putting up mid blocks to low blocks to stop Newcastle and counter them, because they know that Newcastle have not been winning their duels in the center of the park and been forcing Newcastle to play out wide, making them more predictable. It's part of the reason why, and I'll share this part of the screen, it's part of the reason why Newcastle's, even though overall goals have been, they've been okay. 8 goals in 7 games isn't a bad thing, but they haven't been as high as what they could be. And we're going to show that we're also underperforming in our goals as well, in terms of goals scored. And we've been conceding a lot of shots on our goals. And people will say, but we've only conceded 7 goals. And with the stats I'm going to show you guys, I think we've been relatively lucky in terms of the amount of goals, and it's been coming, and it comes down to our quality in terms of being able to keep the ball out, because we've been on the receiving end of 100 shots so far this season. And someone might say, well, 100 shots, maybe some shots have gone into the Leazer's end, or what does that matter? But then if you also look at the shots on target, we have, in terms of on target on our goal, we have been on the receiving end again of some of the highest shots on target on our goal. Oh, so not this part. Gosh, I'm going to find it. So again, this comes down to, in my view, this is kind of my take, where it comes down to individual battles, individual duels, the reduction in those individual battles, in the reduction of individual duels being won. So this is, let me make sure you guys can see it. This is an OptaStat, a really, really good stat website for stats for individual teams. And here I'm going to show as well, not just what I've shown earlier, the territorial dominance, but also the ripple effect on Newcastle's passing, defending, and attack that it's had in terms of the reduction in Newcastle's total duels won. So again, as I've said to you, from left to right, it's Newcastle. We have very limited, and I wanted to kind of highlight another thing in terms of dominance, around territorial dominance, and what the difference is. And I'm going to show you Liverpool's. Share this one. I'm going to show you Liverpool's. So this is Liverpool's territorial dominance, and you can guess that also Liverpool's overall territorial, Liverpool's total duels won is also quite high. So you can see here, this is Liverpool's territorial dominance. This is again from left to right. And remember, the purple ones show Liverpool's dominance. The pink parts of this pitch show opposition's dominance on Liverpool. So oppositions are having very, very limited luck. You can see in the top right, maybe on the flanks there, and also in their own half, like literally centrally in their penalty boxes. But otherwise, if you're looking from the center of Liverpool's box to the center of midfield, to the left and right flanks, Liverpool have territorial dominance on the pitch. And there's like really wide out flanks is where it's contested. Now, no team can have dominance in every area of the pitch all the time. But the fact that Liverpool have managed to do this in 7 games is truly remarkable. And Liverpool have the lowest number of goals conceded, some of the highest goals in the league, as well as the lowest amount of chances created against them, as well as shots against them, shots on target against them. And it's pretty clear why, as you can see from the territorial dominance they've been able to have. Another thing I'm going to show you as well, I'm going to show you Chelsea and Aston Villa. Now, the reason I'm going to show you Chelsea and Aston Villa's territorial dominant stats is because you would have seen on the thumbnail that if Newcastle improve their performance, and this is me focusing on total duels, aerial duels, ground duels, if Newcastle improve this by 2%, right, they will be in the same category as Aston Villa and Chelsea in terms of total duels won. And so if that is the case, if Newcastle can win the same number of total duels, lift their performance rate, they'll be in the same level as the teams who are currently 4th and 5th in the league. This is Chelsea's territorial dominance at the moment. Again, in purple is where Chelsea have the dominance on the pitch typically in their games. The grey areas are where it's being contested, and the pink areas are the areas where rivals or oppositions have some dominance over Chelsea. And Chelsea fans will tell you that there has been issues around their defending, and you can see obviously in their box and out on the right side of their flank, they have 43 up to 43% dominance, 18%, 40% dominance. So teams have had some joy. But in the important parts of the pitch, in my opinion, central defense to central midfield, Chelsea hold a lot of dominance, up to 60%, 70%, just about in their half, 67%, 67% in their half. And this has enabled them, and it's pretty much contested on either flank, which is fine. This has enabled them to increase their ability to shoot on the opposition goals and shoot on target. And actually, they're overperforming in terms of the goals they're scoring by a number, because they're able to have so many shots on opposition goals. They're able to sustain their attacks, especially because their passes in the final third are also quite high as well. Their ground duels especially are only 2% higher than ours. And it is my hypothesis, it is my belief that yes, there's other things that attribute to that: quality of player, technique, and all these other things. But I think the individual duels, the one-on-ones, or if it does, in my view, it doesn't matter how good you are on the ball. If your team is being dominated in terms of 1v1 duels, you are not going to be able to be able to do what you want to do on the pitch. And Chelsea, who are 2% higher than us in ground duels and total duels won, are able to do what they're able to do in terms of shots on target and goals because of that. Here's Aston Villa, who are currently in 5th position. They're slightly more patchy, and I think it's because they're going through what we went through last year, which is the Champions League. But they've still been able to sustain some dominance in the central areas of their defense and their own areas, and as well as out in the flanks. And this has enabled them to continue to, they've actually also been outperforming the amount of goals they've been scoring, outperforming their XG as well. So there's a lot of other areas that are kind of up for, that are being contested. But again, if you compare these two teams to Newcastle United, we are very limited in areas where we have actual dominance. If anything, the only area and it's a very small area of dominance that Newcastle seem to have, is in their own half. So it's no surprise that we've only been able to score 8 goals. We've conceded 7 goals, and we've been fortunate in that respect because we have been on the end of 100 shots on our goal so far, which in itself is a concern. I'm going to talk about more specifically now in terms of how our kind of reduction in our performance in ground duels and total duels won and aerial duels won has, like we've talked about, how it's impacted our territorial dominance, and kind of laying the groundwork where, okay, Newcastle at the moment, the only area of the pitch they seem to have any dominance is in their own half, really, and other areas, especially central midfield, is being contested. Why this is and how this has had an impact on our passing, on our defending, and on our attack. But before I do that, and we're going to go through the stats on that, where Newcastle seem to be ranking in the league for that on Optastat. So I'm going to go quickly through the comments. So Winder, we need new players this winter. I agree, and I think this is why obviously Eddie Howe was kind of really desperate for. We all knew as fans we need the right centre back and we need the right wing forward, but we were going through a realignment process in terms of bringing a new sports director. And anybody who knows the show knows that this is something that had to happen for us, because we weren't able to spend. We didn't have any. We have money, but we weren't able. We were already way over the PSR, and we couldn't spend money in the transfer window. Being very bad sellers. So there's a whole structural improvement that we needed to have. And before I even go into that, but we definitely need new players, Winder. I definitely agree with you, and I think that's why you'll see that I think with new players you'll see a level of competition rising up, and as well as quality and ability as well. We are relying on speed. Yeah, I think if you're talking about our flanks in particular, whether it's Gordon, whether it's Burn, whether it's Isak, and actually you've hit it there, Winder. I am going to talk about how this has impacted how we've been able, especially in attacking areas, how in the final, how it has impacted how we attack teams, and also impacted the level of goals we scored as well. So in terms of that, so you're right. We definitely have been relying on our speed a lot. We've been relying on our quality in different areas of the pitch, but I think it's our kind of reduction in our performance around ground duels, total duels, has had a ripple effect. So talking about that, let's go into the specifics for that around Newcastle. We're going to look at Newcastle's attacking stats. We're going to look at Newcastle's defending stats. We're going to look at Newcastle's passing stats. So my main concern, I'm going to take it there. My main concern has been, as I've kind of talked about it before, has been around Newcastle's passing in the final third. Let me make sure you guys can see this. Newcastle's passing in the final third has been either average or below average. So let me get Newcastle on the screen for the stats. And this is is this our attacking stats or our passing stats? Passing stats. So let's go to the passing stats first. We'll do teams per game. This is attacking. So let's go to passing. And I'll kind of highlight specifically why, when I'm kind of looking at our final third passing. So here we go, percentage-wise. So already in terms of we're not in the top 8, top 9. It's Man City, Tottenham, Southampton, Aston Villa, Liverpool, Chelsea, Fulham are all above it. So what is passing in the final third? Just for folks that don't know, passing in the final third is the amount of passes a team is able to complete in the final third of the pitch. And the final third of the pitch, as we talked about, is, let me show you. Obviously, this is Liverpool's part. This is Liverpool section. But if you can see here, this is the final third where my mouse is. This is where obviously a team's ability to be able to shoot, a team's ability to how they're able to pass, how the quality of passing, the amount of passes they're able to complete in the final third affects their ability to shoot, the shots on target, and all those, and obviously the actual goals they're able to score as well. And Newcastle are literally bang in the middle for passes in the final third, probably even just below the final win. We've got Man City, Tottenham, Southampton, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Liverpool, Chelsea, Fulham, Man United, Brighton, and Newcastle are 11th. So we're just below. We're literally below. We're in the bottom half of the table for passes in the final third. And again, links into, like I've explained before, Newcastle's where Newcastle's territorial dominance or lack of territorial dominance has been. So if we go back to this again, ability, Newcastle's, here we go. Can you guys see that? Again, passes in the final third. Now, if opposition teams, we're talking about the final third, this is from left to right. And for the folks that are just joining us, in pink is the places where oppositions, this is from Newcastle going from left to right, yeah? So going that way. In pink are the places where opposition teams have territorial dominance over Newcastle. So in this final third area here, Newcastle mostly only have 41% dominance, 44%, 43%, 35%, especially in the penalty box area. Passes that have been able to be complete, and this as a result of, you can see the central midfield area where it's usually is 50-50 for Newcastle at this moment. The only, and that's the grey parts where it's 50, where it's been contested, where it's, Newcastle have 49% dominance here, 54% dominance, 51% here, and it's only in our third of the pitch, literally, where I think Fabian Schär and maybe Kieran Trippier or Livramento are, where we have some level of dominance. So it's no wonder to me that Newcastle are bottom half of the table when it comes to passes complete in the final third of the pitch. And this has also, and we're going to talk about it, I just want to see if there's anything else, but this has also impacted the number of shots we have been able to take, and the number of shots on target we've been able to take. So because we're not able to pass and complete passes in the center of the field, partly because we have no dominance. And the reason why we have no dominance, in my view, in my assessment, is because we've not been winning our individual duels. These have reduced by at least 1 to 2%. And if Newcastle increase this by 2%, which will put us in the same category as Aston Villa and Chelsea, who currently sit 4th and 5th, Newcastle would be able to shoot more on goal and will be able to have more shots on target. So you can see Newcastle are literally 13th in terms of passes completed. Now, the other ripple effect is that accurate crosses, this is again speaking on passing. Can you guys see my screen? This is the percentage of where Newcastle are in terms of accurate crosses. We're third in the league for that. And somebody will think, oh, that's really, really good. And it is good, but I think it's not by design, not fully by design. And as I've explained, because we have some dominance on the flanks through our quality, through Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Jacob Murphy, it's no wonder that our cross accuracy puts us third in the league. But I think we're partly forced to do that because the midfield, and especially the final third area, we lack that territorial dominance. And we lack that territorial dominance because we've not been winning our individual duels. The other area that we have also been good at is through balls. So we're kind of like 5th or 6th in the league for that. So there is still some good in terms of our transitional play as well. So in terms of our ability to attack and what we've been doing a lot, and I'm going to actually go to yes, what we've been able to do a lot is use the flanks or do through balls and do transitional play to be able to hurt teams. But because we have not been able to have territorial dominance in the middle of the pitch, this has reduced our ability to attack. And I'm going to go now to the attacking stats to show you guys what I mean, where Newcastle ranks. So just remember, in terms of the final third, Newcastle are bottom half, 12th or 13th. But we're kind of higher, we're top 3 in terms of crossings and through balls. But in my view, this is as a result of being forced to play on the flanks because we've been lacking that territorial dominance in the central parts of the pitch. So go into the attacks. So Newcastle have scored 8 goals this season. This puts us Again, bottom half. We've scored less goals than Wolves. We've scored less goals than Leicester. We've scored less goals than Fulham. We've scored less goals than West Ham, and obviously Aston Villa and others. Why have we scored less goals than these guys? Well, if you look at the shots we take, again, this is for shots. Newcastle are bottom half of the league for that, and shots on target. So shots on target, shot where goalkeeper has to make a save, for instance. Newcastle are again bottom half of the table for that. And it is my view, my opinion, that because Newcastle have been lacking in that territorial dominance in the central areas of the pitch, which is due to the lack of our ability, which is as a result, in my opinion, our 1v1 battles, our individual duels, both on the ground and aerially, and total duels won, which has reduced by 2%. Newcastle have not been able to take possession of the central midfield areas, and this has impacted our ability to pass the ball in the final third. And because we've not been able to pass the ball in the final third, we've taken less shots, bottom half of the league, and we've taken less shots on target, again, bottom half of the league, and we've been which has also had a ripple effects on the amount of goals we've scored, which is 8 goals. Again, bottom half of the league. We've been forced to go out wide on the flanks. And because of our quality in Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, and Jacob Murphy, and Mr. Kieran Trippier, this is what has been keeping us afloat in terms of scoring goals, but also, and we're going to talk about now the defensive action. We've conceded 7 goals in the league so far. So, as I've said, the teams who are currently 4th and 5th in the league, Aston Villa, and then I'm going to go back to the territorial part of dominance. Aston Villa and Chelsea, I'm going to show you guys, we're going to talk about the defending side of the game. Aston Villa and Chelsea are both 2% higher than us in terms of individual duels. And this has enabled them to have more of territorial dominance on the pitch in the central areas and in the final third of the pitch as well, where their quality has been able to allow them to have more shots on goal, more shots on target, more goals scored, and has also put them in 4th and 5th position in the table. So it is my hypothesis, my theory, that Newcastle, if they increase their ground duels, this is Newcastle's territorial dominance, and this is for the folks who are just coming in. Newcastle have only had territorial dominance in very limited parts of the pitch, and this has impacted our ability to pass. This has impacted our ability to also attack, and our ability to be able to shoot and to have shots on goal, where Newcastle have really suffered in terms of being able to have an impact in those areas. And now and it's really been our quality. So 8 goals we've scored out of, even though we've scored 8 goals, but our shots on goal and shots on target are bottom half. Our 8 goals have taken us to 7th in the league. So in a sense, we are overperforming in terms of those areas, but I think it's because of our individual quality in Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Isak, Jacob Murphy, Kieran Trippier, chipping in with goals, with assists, and essentially carrying Newcastle over the line. So that's the attacking stats. Let's go to the defending stats. Let's go to what I've been hammering on about. In fact, let me go first. Before I go to the defending stats, let me go back to, I want to be able to press this home in terms of, where are you? In terms of, is it here? Well, I'm going to now talk about the actual duels, what I mean by duels and ground duels and territorial duels as well, kind of hammer that part home. Where is it? Tackles, possessions, blocks, 1. Okay, yeah, here we go. So you guys can see it here. Let me make sure you guys can see ground duels. Oh, yeah, good. You guys can see it. Let me go to teams. So where Newcastle rank in those areas. So if we look at the okay, these are the attacking stats again. Oh no, it's defending stats. Here we go. Shots in the box. Defending. Where are you? Shots, box, goals. Come on, let's find it. Where are you? Overall, where are you? Let me find you. So X shots. So these are all actually the shots we've conceded so far, guys. This is the defending stats, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment once I find what I'm looking for. Passing, final third, defensive. So defensive actions. So this is where it is. Newcastle in defensive action. So ground duels 1. Newcastle are again bottom half of the league, and the teams that are above us. So bottom half with 49.62% of ground duels won. Now, if you look at Chelsea, who are currently 5th for ground duels won, they're on 51%. Aston Villa are on 50.92%. So both those teams, Aston Villa are just about like a 0.2 above us. Chelsea are about 2%, just over 2% above us in terms of ground duels won. And as I said before, this has a ripple effect on if you're winning. What are ground duels? Ground duels are your individual battles with the opposition. If you're winning your individual battles, as the Brighton manager said, you are able to there's a ripple effect on other aspects of the pitch. And those aspects of the pitch have been Newcastle's territorial dominance or lack of territorial dominance. The only dominance we've had is in our third, whereas Chelsea and Aston Villa, who are 2% higher in their ground duels, have more dominance in the central areas of the pitch. And this has had an impact on how much passing they have in the final third of the pitch. So how much they're able to get, the percentage of passes they're able to complete in the opposition half. And this has had impact on the number of shots they're able to take and the number of shots on target they're able to take, and which has obviously had an impact on the amount of goals they're able to have. Aston Villa have 2 more goals than us. Chelsea have about 17 goals. So their quality has been able to shine because of that. So Newcastle, it is my hypothesis that if Newcastle improve their ground duels, improve their intensity in winning their individual battles, Newcastle United will have more territorial dominance on the pitch, which will allow them to have better final passes in the final third of the pitch and be able to shoot more goals on target, shots on target, and to score more goals. And this is Newcastle and aerial duels, where we do slightly better. Obviously, we've got Dan Burn, especially doing well, really tall guys, 53%. Liverpool are higher than us, obviously, and their defensive actions are, obviously they are really, really high. So you guys can see from all of this that if you have dominance, if you win your individual battles on the pitch, it has a positive impact on what you can do in the final third. It has a positive impact on your shots on target, and what you're able to do on the pitch. Now, I'm gonna kind of before I go into what Newcastle I think need to do to improve, how I think Newcastle can go about improving winning their individual battles, how they can get that, improve it by that 2% after the international break. I want to be able to show as well, we've shown the passing, the defending, and the attacking. I want to be able to show how this has impacted our style of play on the pitch. Essentially, where I've said, you guys who have been on here, I've said, look, when because we're not able to pass in the final third, our final third pass and our attack has been thwarted because we're not able to have dominance in the central part of the pitch. it has impacted our ability to attack properly. So let me show you on the screen what I mean by that. And I'm going to go through some of our matches, the 7 games that we've had. Let me make sure you guys can see that. Can you guys see that? Let me make sure you guys can see that on all part of the thing. Yes. So this is our average positions on the pitch. Is obviously this. I know I'm not going to go through each individual games and I know there's different kind of situations for both. Obviously, Southampton, we lost a man, all these other things. But I want to be able to show you guys this. And before I do that, let me read our comment. Adieri Konguma, how you doing, sir? Hope you're well. Hi, Philip. How are you? Amanda Stavely should invest their money in Newcastle United and come back to Newcastle United. You're very consistent with this, Adieri. We'll see. I don't think she's coming back, but we'll see. You might be proven right. So back to our style of play and average positions. The overarching theme I want to be able to show in this is, let me make sure I get to this part of the screen, is because we've not been able to have dominance in the pitch, we've not been winning our individual battles. You see, I know this is Southampton, but this is pretty common in the other games as well. This is Newcastle going from bottom to down. 14 and 10 is Isak and Gordon. I want to be able to highlight how disconnected our attack is from our midfield. And our midfield is having to also come back on our defense because teams are just winning their individual battles centrally, especially in the earlier half, either passing through us, but also winning individual duels against us. Our individual duels have been very, very, very low. It's a similar thing, and this is against Bournemouth away. Very similar against Bournemouth away. Let me move these out the way. Bournemouth away, you can see Isak and Gordon by themselves. A big gap between them and the midfield, who are again forced back to kind of cover for the attack as well. So that's Bournemouth and the midfield. That's our away performance. Where again we very low in terms of our passing, and we're able to get away with our quality. Barnes and Gordon, Nottingham Forest League Cup game, 11 and 10. I think this is Barnes and Isak. Again, disconnected from the midfield, who have been forced back. We're not winning our individual battles. We're not winning before the 22-23 team, which was winning high turnovers, winning the individual battles, like Botman winning 68% of their duels, Burn 65%, Fabian Schär 50+%. Where now it's at 49% and respectively, and just about 50% for Burn. So if you get those stats back up, those individual wins, Newcastle do much better. This is our game against Tottenham. You can see here at the bottom side of the screen, Isak is by himself in this game. Tottenham totally dominated at home. And again, we was able to win that game through individual ability of Isak and Gordon. And we was quite fortunate in terms of our defending that Tottenham hadn't made the right decisions in the final third of the pitch. Now, the game where things began to improve, in my opinion, is the Wolves game. The Wolves game, things changed a little bit where Newcastle started using, in particular, let me delete this, started using Lewis Hall and Livramento to invert, to support Bruno, to support the defense in the central areas. As you guys can see here, Newcastle from bottom up. And this allowed the midfield to push up. You can see Bruno pushed up. Joe Linton, number 7, pushed up. And this also had a positive effect on Gordon, number 10, Isak, number 14, and number 23, Jacob Murphy, where they all were able to push up. You see number 21 there, Livramento, pushing up there. And they were able to connect from the defense to the midfield and to the attack. And Newcastle were able to exact some dominance over Wolves. Now, someone might say that, and I suspect a little bit that Gary O'Neill thought that by maybe ceded some of that possession because he wanted to counter-attack Newcastle. And you remember the goal that Wolves scored was on a transition where they were in the final third of the pitch. Sean Longstaff made a bad pass, but then it led to there was a series of other errors where they counter-attacked us and they scored. I mentioned that because I think it impacted how Eddie Howe looked at the Fulham game. But before I go to that Fulham game, this is what I think. This is the first time Newcastle showed their ability and upped their duels, individual battles in the center of the pitch, and our goals, shots on target upped, our shots in general upped. But you can see the reason why. We won our individual battles, we took territorial dominance on that pitch, and we were able to have more shots on this target and have more, and obviously won the game at the end. But what I think happened was, in terms of the goal that we conceded down the flank, which was down Lewis Hall's flank, I think this partly impacted how Eddie Howe looked at the game against Fulham, where obviously Fulham have the man in form, Mr. Traore, and this is Fulham's. This is us against Fulham. So Howe made a tactical error. Now, obviously, I'm speaking from hindsight is 2020 vision, isn't it? I'm not going to go too much in the tactics, but again, we're talking about the duels won, the ability in one-on-one defending. One-on-one duels with the opposition. Howe had took off Lewis Hall, and he had taken off from left back, and also Sean Longstaff. He had took off Sean Longstaff from Lewis Hall from the game after we beat Wolves, and he put on Willock in Sean Longstaff position and Lloyd Kelly in Lewis Hall's position. Now, on paper, you're thinking, they're both athletic guys. They can deal with Traore and they can deal with Tete on that flank. They didn't deal with those guys. And those guys, speaking of territorial duels, between them, they only won one ground duel in 45 minutes. You can check that on FotMob and you can check that on SofaScore. And for Willock, I think he attempted one. There's one on you can see live, but on SofaScore and FotMob, I think he attempted maybe one ground duel and he lost. He had 0%, and Lloyd Kelly wasn't much better. So as a result of that, you can see, not just blaming them two, but it was low across in terms of individual battles, total duels. It was low across the squad, across the team, but in particularly those two individuals who haven't started a game for Newcastle since. I want to point out, this is Newcastle's average position. You can see how the forwards and the midfield and the defense were literally sandwiched were sandwiched together. We had no territorial ability in that final third. And this is again pointing to why our passing percentage in opposition's final third is very low. And you can see this again in that Fulham game. We had lost our individual battles. Fulham were very aggressive, and they earned 4 yellow cards in that first half. 8 yellow cards in all in that whole game because they were that aggressive. And Newcastle pretty much lost all their individual battles. And because they lost all their individual battles, Fulham were able to have territorial dominance in that game. They're able to have more shots on goal, have more shots on target, have more passes in the final third, and as a result, won the game very comfortably, 3-1. This game, though, the blessing of this game had a positive impact on Eddie Howe. And the impact was he realized, and he talks about this and we know this because he talks about this in his press conferences, he realized that his team, it was more, yes, we can say that maybe he made a tactical error in bringing on Willock in Sean Longstaff position and Lloyd Kelly in Lewis Hall's position. But there was a bigger situation going on, and it was Newcastle's intensity. And we're talking about Newcastle's intensity. We're talking about the individual battles which Newcastle was so good at, in particularly in particularly in the 22-23 season. Newcastle, he needed to get his players up and ready to win their individual duels, to up the ground duels. And you'll see, especially from what was really impressive about them, and this is the average position of the Newcastle players. I want to say what was so impressive in that game was that Newcastle did okay in terms of total duels won, ground duels, aerial duels in the first half, but they upped it by at least 5-10% or something. And Newcastle were able to have even more shots on goal and more shots on target. And obviously, that's when they earned and passing in the final third. And that's when they earned their penalty as well. And you can see now the other thing that this is Newcastle's average positions. Now, obviously, we're playing Man City, so you're not going to be, totally, there's going to be a limit to how much dominance you're going to have. But what I want to be able to highlight is just how close. Let me show this. This might be a better angle. Let me see how it looks on the screen there for you guys. Yeah, so it's a lot better on this angle. How the connection between Newcastle's defense, midfield, and attack. You can see how close Burn, number 33, is next to Joe Linton, who was the connector in that game between the midfield, defense, midfield, and attack, going up and down, protecting the flanks as well. And Tonali was pressing on the other half. And Bruno was in the middle, connecting both half of them together. And our defense, Shaw and Burn in particular. I know Shaw is the last man forward, but that was partly due what was happening on the flanks of Grealish and Guardiola. But you can see the number 2 there in Kieran Trippier pushing right up to connect to Murphy, to connect to Tonali, who connects to Anthony Gordon. There's a real effort from our back line in Burn, in 33, and in Lewis Hall, who, welcome back, Mr. Hall, who is number 20. And I think he had 100 plus touches in this game as well. Hall is becoming a very, very important player. But the main point is the connection between our defense, midfield, and attack. And this is made through the fact that players had to up their ability to win their 1v1 battles. And this gave them confidence, as what the Brighton manager was talking about when he was about Brighton, their confidence to do other things, which is the passing in the final third, the passing, the shots on target, being able to dribble, doing all these things. This had a positive impact on Newcastle United form, and they showed a very similar average position to what they did against Wolves, and this carried on into the Everton game. Now I know people obviously. The frustration of the Everton game is that we didn't win the game because we dominated the game. And you will see in terms of attacking momentum, Newcastle were attacking at least 70-80% of that game. We had Wolves on ropes. We didn't have maybe the shots on target that we would have liked. But I think that is purely down to not having Isak and Wilson. And I think when those guys come back, and I know Gordon still did a good job, but he's a different type of attacker. But again, Newcastle, you'll see on the stats, Newcastle United won their individual duels in the defense, in the midfield, and the attack. You'll see Gordon's stats go, for instance, are shoot right up. And you can see again very clearly, in my view, a real kind of connection from the defense, who have now pushed right up as well. Burn is furthest back, but you can see number 5 there, Shaw, very close to number 2, Kieran Trippier and Jacob Murphy and Tonali. And on the other side, Lewis Hall, who again has been excellent for us. And you can see Joe Linton right up against, next to Burn, who's again next to Gordon. There's a real connection between Bruno to Tonali to Gordon. There's a lot closer connection there. Now, we would have liked, and I think this is where it comes down to quality. We lacked in terms of our maybe a little bit in the passing in the final third. And I think again, when Isak and Wilson come back, you will see us being a lot more more decisive in that final third as well. But so I've said all that to say this: whether it's the Wolves game was the first kind of indicator that Newcastle were going to start winning their individual duels. And I think how, again, 2020 vision, and on paper, I thought he was right to do this. Howe made a mistake in putting Lloyd Kelly and Wilson, maybe Willock and Willock, who possibly wasn't fit, wasn't really ready for that game. He looked a lot better against Everton when he came on. And Lloyd Kelly maybe isn't that happy about being that left back. He's a lot better at left centre back. Howe made a tactical error in that game, but also the whole team were not good in their ground duels, in their ground duels and aerial duels in their individual battles, but they upped it against Man City, and they, especially in the second half, and they upped it again against Everton. And it was only due to maybe that lack of quality in the final third, in my opinion, that Newcastle did not win that game. So when we start talking about the importance, in my view, in regards to those in regards to those individual battles, ground duels, aerial duels, 1v1s, being able to beat your opponent. Newcastle are underperforming in that area currently by about 2%. And we know what happens when Newcastle up those levels. They can push, it has a ripple effect, a positive ripple effect on their passing, their attacking, and on their defending, as well as their territorial dominance on different areas of the pitch, centrally and in attacking areas. And look, you have to keep things in perspective. It's 7 games, we've still got 31 games to go. And I think Newcastle were just gathering momentum before this international break, for instance. And so what do Newcastle need to do and I think some of these things Newcastle are already doing, and there's things that are in their control. There's various things that can impact a player's individual kind of performance on the pitch, especially in their 1v1 battles. We talked about contracts, Gordon, whose performance in the pitch, and we're talking about individual 1v1 battles, was very low prior to his, obviously we know that now that he's signed a new 6-year contract. And since that time, his individual 1v1 battles have really, really upped. His energy, his performance has really upped. I'm sure that's not the only reason why it's upped, but it's a contributing factor in my opinion. And we have about now 8-9 other players who are on their final year contracts, and this needs to be resolved. And I think once these things are resolved, whether players have their contracts renewed or extended or not, this level of certainty will help the squad and help the team. So there's less distractions. And just tactically, the centre backs, both Burn and Shaw, for instance, have made a tactical effort in pushing up and making sure they're supporting the midfielding, is particularly Bruno, and kind of helping him in the defensive actions. And I think having Hall and having Livramento also supporting their ability on the ball as well as in their 1v1 duels has helped us, I think, have more territorial dominance in the center of the park, where now it's a little bit more, it's a more of a gray area. Whereas I think in the first couple of games, teams are really dominating us, especially in Tottenham, Southampton, and Bournemouth games, where I think that changed obviously in Wolves, Man City, and obviously the Everton game. So Newcastle are already showing signs of improving those things. And so the other one is obviously training, fitness, and fatigue. Players have been tired. Bruno obviously had a short break in terms of the season and others, but he's showing signs of recovery. His individual battles, his ground duels, individual duels, he's one of the highest in our squad, in our team. Even when he wasn't doing that well, he was still one of the highest in our squad, and he's upped his game. Tonali, Kieran Trippier, those guys who are very good in their 1v1s, also good technical players. Kieran Trippier, Tonali, Howe, Livramento, all those guys and Joe Linton especially, have all upped their individual 1v1 battles in the midfield. And this has been helped by the fact that the defenders have been stepping up, have been increasing their individual battles as well a little bit, though that obviously they need to continue to improve that. And this has allowed us to have a little bit more dominance, a little bit more say in games, i.e. Man City. Man City is a difficult one because obviously they're Man City, but it showed itself against Everton and it showed itself against Wolves. Both of those games as well were away games. So I'll be very, very keen to see how Newcastle do at home. And that Brighton game is going to tell me a lot. So fitness, fatigue, and Howe talked about how he, in fact, prior to the Man City game, how they changed their training regime and how they upped their training as well. So there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of changes in those area, and competition. And competition is obviously now that we've had Isak, Wilson, and Lewis Miley who are looking forward to coming back after the international break. This is going to add competition in the midfield area. It's going to add competition in the striking area, central striking area. Wilson, Isak, Gordon and Barnes on the left. This is going to up their performances as well. They're going to be trying to get onto the team. What do I need to do to get on the team? I have to win my 1v1 battles. I have to chase down the ball. This will hopefully have an impact on in what we do in the final third of the pitch. This will have what we do in our individual battles, our ground duels, our passing in the final third, our shots on target, and the goals and the amount of goals that we're going to score. So with those players back, I think we're going to see that level of competition increase, and we're going to see an upward trajectory in my view in terms of goals scored for Newcastle, and I think we're going to see less shots on our goal, less shots on our goal on target, because we'll be having that much more dominance in the central areas of the pitch and a little bit more dominance in the final third of the pitch, where teams have to deal with us a lot more, have to react to us rather than us reacting to them. The things that are out of our control is obviously the recruitment of players. It's not January yet, so we can't do anything about it. Yes, we need a right centre-back. We even probably need a right centre-back and a right back as well of quality. But we're not going to get him now because the transfer window is closed. So that's out of our control at this moment in time. But also it gives us something to look forward to, that for instance, if we do get a Gahey or that profile of defender, you guys can already see the profile of defender that we need. There's a reason why, for instance, Gahey is wears a number 6 shirt. That's usually for defensive midfielders. And it is my opinion that the modern centre backs are actually the new defensive midfielders. And with a Gahey helping to push up, or Gahey or a profile of Gahey helping to push up into the midfield, and adding that extra layer of protection for Bruno, this will encourage Bruno and Tonali and Joe Linton to also push up and allow the attacking line to also push up into the opposition end. And this again will have a ripple effect in our passing in the final third, in our shots and the shots on target and goals scored, and hopefully, and I believe, in our wins, and to reduce our losses as well. So and this all boils down to, as I've mentioned in my conclusion to this, and this is what Newcastle need to improve, and what I think will happen, especially now international breaks. New players get to rest a little bit more. Obviously, some are on international breaks, some will be away, but I guess they can still kind of up their fitness. So there'll be some rest as for some players, and the opportunity for others to up their fitness as well. So you will have that recovery. But yeah, as I've mentioned, as I've said, tactically, the players know what they need to do. The defenders know what they need to do. They need to push up. They need to press up and support the midfield. And then that allows the midfield to push up and support the attack. And it allows us to be able to attack and to press on the other side of the pitch. So, and we're going to have players coming back. Lewis Miley, Sean Longstaff, Lewis Miley, Wilson, Isak. That extra quality also deepens our bench and what we can do from the bench. So, for instance, I think the front three will consist of Jacob Murphy on the right rather than Gordon, and it will be between Gordon and Barnes fighting that out for the left and forward positions, and Isak and Wilson fighting out for the central midfield positions. So our bench could have Wilson, Barnes, Willock on it. It would have Lewis Miley on it. It would have Sean Longstaff on it. It's absolutely the only lack of depth we have is obviously is in the defensive areas. We'll have Kraft, for instance, but otherwise, especially in the midfield and the attacking areas, the bench look a lot more deeper, and this will enable Howe to rotate the team even within the games to maintain pressure, so to maintain the team to continue to win their individual battles, to have a ripple effect which has a positive ripple effect on the passing, on the attacking, and on the defending part, and kind of allows Newcastle to have momentum in those games and to hopefully finish those games and win those games and finish those games strongly. So there's a lot more positive things to do. And like I've said in the thumbnail, the teams that being Aston Villa and Chelsea, between them are only 1% to 2% higher than Newcastle United for instance, in their ground duels won. And I think that's the key element that's letting them have the dominance in the central areas of the pitch, and this has given them the opportunity and ability to pass, to have a higher pass completions in the final third, which enables them to create more shots on target and shots in general, which again equals to more goals and more wins. And I think if Newcastle up their percentage up by 2%, and I think they can do that just naturally. I think they've been underperforming. The Newcastle have been underperforming in their individual battles. And I think they can do more than 2%, but they've been underperforming, especially when players come back, but they've been underperforming. And once they raise their particular levels in winning their individual battles, I think they can get themselves right up there. So from now, when they come back in an international break in October, around the 19th of October to mid-November, I do expect Newcastle to even push a lot more hard to up, especially if they up their performance by 2% in those 1v1 battles. I believe Newcastle can push themselves up into those 5th and 4th positions and really challenge those teams. So that's what I believe Newcastle can do. I think Newcastle are currently underperforming by 2%, but there is a lot more in terms of that is there for them. I think it's a strange thing to say that underperforming is still a good sign, because even whilst they've been underperforming our individual duels, underperforming in our defensive actions, in our passing, in our attacking areas, we've been, because of our natural quality, that's, as some might say, mask it, but I'll say there's an underbelly of quality in the squad that has enabled us to still be able to win games, as well as save us from conceding goals, i.e. Nick Pope saving us, I don't know how many times, from conceding and losing games or drawing games. Now that you've seen a slight increase in our individual battles won in the Man City game, in the Wolves game, in the Everton game, you've also seen an increase in our passing in the final thirds, a little bit more in our shots on target as well. And so long as we continue that hard work in winning our individual battles, when players come back from injury, Isak, Wilson, Miley, that momentum can only carry us more forward. And I think our performance levels in those 1v1 battles, I think, can go higher than 2%, and that will propel us up the league. Now, the other teams can also do that, but we can't control what they do. I'm only focused on what Newcastle can do. And so that's the show, guys. That's my conclusion. Newcastle to up their levels from 2% to in terms of their 1v1 battles, their individual battles. In their individual battles, will have a positive ripple effect on their attacking, on their passing, on their defending, and will propel us up the league and make us contenders for that Champions League spot. And that's what we want at the end of the day, don't we, folks? So, guys, for all of those that have stuck with me from the beginning to the end, thank you. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. Please do like, share, and subscribe. But also make sure you have a good evening. Make sure you have a good rest. And hope you have a blessed night. And until next time, guys, take care and God bless, folks.
Brilliant from Howe. And now Murphy can take on the shot. Fabian Schär.